Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Vedanta Society of Providence Sunday Lecture, 5 p.m. My name is Chet. I'll be giving tonight's talk, The World According to Vedanta, according to Chet. But before we begin, we always start with the Sunday congregational prayer, so the words will be shown on the screen. You can join me in reciting the prayer. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, thou abidest in all, thou art all, thou assumest all forms. Thou art the origin and goal of all. Thou art the self of all. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss. Salutations unto thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May our minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, 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 peace be unto all. So you may have seen this chart before. I used it last April when I gave this talk, and you may be thinking, if you saw that talk, is this going to be a repeat of the April talk? It is not, but the same qualifier applies. You see, according to Swami Savagantananda, the former minister here, Vedanta is a philosophy which is an endless and relentless search for the truth. And Sri Ramakrishna himself said, so long I live, so long I learn. And the Vedanta practices says that the practices of its teachings culminate in the highest experience possible for human beings and the fulfillment of all desires. As it was asked in the Upanishad, what is that knowing which all is known? Or perhaps, I'll modify it a little bit, what is that experiencing which all experience is had? Or perhaps what is that experience which all love is known? And so although the teaching and objective of the Vedanta teachings is for the growth, the freedom, and ultimately the realization of the highest truth through direct experience, some topics dealing with the obstacles and impediments to this growth, especially impediments caused by one's attachments to worldly values or our personal idiosyncrasies or our most cherished desires, it can be unsettling for some. So, as Swami Adishwarananda put it in his talk, The Direct Knowledge Way, knowledge is fire. Before fire can illumine, it burns. So that's my disclaimer for tonight's talk. No further disclaimer will be given, and viewer discretion is advised. So tonight I want to survey the experiences of the rishis and the sages and yogis who follow this path of Yoga Vedanta, and we will see how the teachings and prescriptions of Vedanta directly derive from those experiences. But we have to caution ourselves a little bit. We have to avoid any idea that, make any assumption that we're on the same common ground of understanding with those who have had this experience, or that we even share the same philosophical perspectives. Because, there may be some exceptions, but most likely we are all here to learn from them rather than assume that we're on the same experiential footing. So we have to always reflect on these ideas carefully. Even simple words, for example, even the word mind in yoga has nuanced definitions. So what we generally convey as the meaning of mind in the Western sense is that what I can recall, we'll see in the yoga system, there are different levels of mind, and I'll have some examples as we go forward. So as we hear these talks, even simple words, we have to make sure we understand from the experience of the yogis and the rishis what those words mean, and plus they're coming to us translated as well from Sanskrit, so there's some subtleties there. So when dealing with very complicated and difficult problems, one standard method is to stand on the shoulder of giants, to paraphrase, I think that was Newton. And so I'm going to do the same tonight. We're going to take a look at some of the teachings of very well-known yogis and rishis and monks and teachers of Vedanta. And I'm going to compile and adapt an excerpt and then draw some influences from all of these teachings, but that will be my approach. So one of the most important parts of Vedanta is that we must start from where we are. That is an important teaching that we hear from all of the swamis. You must start from where you are. And so tonight we're going to look at a method for making that determination. But before doing so, I would like to review and take as our foundation the teachings of Vedanta as presented by Swami Yudhishwarananda in his book, The Vedanta Way to Peace and Happiness. And he was the Swami, the first retreat I ever attended here, he was giving that retreat. So he was a senior Swami at the time. And I've always found that his teachings were very powerful and very impactful for me. He was also an extensive author, and so I'll be quoting and paraphrasing from this book, Vedanta Way to Peace and Happiness, right now. So the first and foremost point that he makes is that many are now beginning to see Vedanta as the teaching for modern times. And we saw that from Swami Vivekananda too. He said, the time has come to bring Vedanta out of the forest and out to the people. Vedanta is nothing if it is not problem-solving, is a quote that Swami Yudhishwarananda attributes to Swami Vivekananda. And then Swami Yudhishwarananda discusses what he calls the changing landscape. And to give you the context, he was writing this in about 2004. He published this book. So the changing landscape. And what he said, the changing landscape is that the conflict between religion and science has reached a crisis level. And we heard that from Swami Ranganatha too in his book, The Human Being in Depth, where he says the technology has gotten to the point where it's got ahead of the human element, and so it became a dangerous thing. So I'll quote now from Swami Yudhishwarananda's book. He said, quote, frustrated by a sense of crisis, many are seeking solace in new movements such as fanaticism, prophetism, atheism, humanism, drug mysticism, New Ageism, or the use and pursuit of art or intellectual speculation as spiritual substitutes. And then he goes on to describe the characteristics of each of those movements, discusses what he sees as their limitations, and explains how, by examining the true root of human desire, he concludes that those movements ultimately cannot satisfy the highest desire of sincere seekers. And we'll explain why, we'll see how he explains why. And this is his claim that many will see Vedanta as the future teaching for modern times. Now, a similar idea appears in the foreword to the book I Am That, which is a collection of teachings of Nisargadatta Maharaj. And the foreword of I Am That was written by Douwe T. Mershma of the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, Holland. And he was a professor, a student of Advaita Vedanta, and a yogic teacher. He founded the Advaitic Center in Gouda, Netherlands. And one of the points he makes in his foreword is that when adherents to certain philosophies or religions see that the limits of the rituals or philosophies or symbols are not satisfying or finding limits to them, as all words do, then those adherents and practitioners of any specific system will eventually seek out new systems or abandon all systems altogether. And that abandoning is happening today cannot be disputed. In data that I put together from, this is actually Pew Research, I made the chart, but it's their numbers, and don't go crazy trying to read the chart. I'm going to sum it up for you real quickly. But basically, that the group called the religiously unaffiliated is expected to gain by about 61 million followers over the period 2010 to 2050. Christianity, according to their research, is expected to lose about 66 million. And most of the other ones, like Islam, Buddhism, folk religions, other religions, they're more or less flat with a plus or minus a million or so. And it was a sophisticated study. It includes the death rates, the birth rates, and people leaving for other reasons. But it was an interesting data, and it's in line with what we've been hearing. So, of course, abandoning any system should be based on legitimate limitations, and really only after a seeker gave a sustained, sincere effort to try to follow the teachings. It shouldn't be abandoned just for trivial reasons or for the novelty of different religions or religious shopping. Now I want to come back to Swami Yudhishwarananda's how he explains Vedanta in the following words, and this is again quoting from his book. Once looked upon as life-negating speculations of the stargazers of the East, Vedanta is now regarded by many thinkers as the teaching which gives us hope for the future. Vedanta is based on a set of principles. Scientific, because they are verifiable and repeatable. Democratic, because they foster individual freedom. Universal, because they apply to people of all time. Pragmatic, because they focus on human problems and human development. And psychological, because they relate to human experience. Now, the ultimate reality, according to Vedanta, is an all-pervading pure consciousness, a one without a second, beyond all names in all forms and all epithets. And the various names, forms, and epithets used by the different religions to describe this ultimate reality are really attempts to put into words, to name the nameless, to attribute forms to the formless, or epithets to that which defies all names, forms, and epithets. And so Vedanta asserts truth is one, sages call it by various names. And I put in my notes here words that you can see on that podium, because I thought I may have been using the podium tonight. But anyway, the words are there on the podium. So let's come back now to Nisargadatta Maharaj, because he even says the expression, I am that, which is the title of the collection of talks, is itself at some point limited. And he goes on to explain that all words, all symbols, are tools of the mind and satisfy the mind alone. And he further explains that any and all expressions, any search for cause and effect, and all definitions are limited to the logical processing of the mind. And so remember, we talked about the mind having four parts. We'll talk about that, the buddhi, the chitta, and the manas, the ahamkara. So there are different parts of the mind. And so there's one, the logical processing part of the mind is the one that seeks causes, effects, and words and definitions. And so they do have, of course, words have utility for the day-to-day work in the world. We all do that. And reasons and symbols, they help us in navigating the world. But in terms of the highest direct spiritual experiences, they're pointers. They're pointers alone, but they'll never be the experience itself. And so now let's take a few more excerpts from Swami Yudhishwarananda's book. And this will really establish the foundation which I want to build on. So about human individuals, Swami wrote, human individuals are not civilized animals, as some maintain, but rather fallen angels. Their master urges freedom of the soul and not sense gratification, pleasure, or power, as psychologists would have us believe. Consciously or unconsciously, human individuals are in search of their uppercase S self. We call it in Vedanta the self. On creation, he wrote, creation is not an act by an extracosmic God. It is the evolution and involution of the pure consciousness. It is beginningless. On suffering, he wrote, suffering is not due to the retribution of a God, bad luck, chance, or any external agency. Suffering is due to ignorance, which separates us from the center of our being, a separation caused by ego, attachment, aversion, and clinging. On good and evil. There is no such thing as absolute good or absolute evil. These are pairs of opposites. One cannot exist without the other. What is good for one may be evil for another. The idea that evil will be eliminated and one day only good will prevail is absurd. On the validity of spiritual truth, he wrote, "The validity of truth depends on direct perception. Believing is simply accepting the words of another. Reasoning cannot give direct perception. Direct perception is through the soul, not through the mind. Direct perception requires that we first purify our minds. The proof of direct perception is permanent transformation of character." On destiny, there is no rest, no peace, until the direct experience of the all-pervading consciousness beyond all name and form is had. Direct experience, however, is not for a chosen few. It's very optimistic, but is the destiny of all. Heaven and hell are only experiences of the mind. On existence, he wrote, "There is only one soul that lives in all. Virtue is those thoughts and deeds and acts which unite us. Vice is that which separates us. Oneness is the basis of all ethics and morality." So I think that provides a nice solid framework for the basic teachings of Vedanta, which I want to build a talk on. So that was a lot of information in a very short time. So now I want to rewind a little bit and slowly build up to these conclusions of Vedanta, continuing by surveying the teachings and expressions of the rishis and swamis and yogis. So in his talk, The Direct Knowledge Way, Swami Yudhishwarananda discusses the 4 signs of awakening. And the first sign, he says, is a basic understanding of fundamental facts. Then the idea comes, quote, "These teachings are not fabrications, these are facts, let me follow." And this is the first sign of awakening. So everything we heard up to now, which are the teachings of Vedanta, it has to first come to us that these teachings are real teachings, not fabrications, and so this is something we should follow. And then he gives the second. Then our knowledge reveals that it's our attachments, our imaginations, our fantasies that are preventing us from getting on the highway to truth. Ultimately, the truth comes to your mind. I have created walls around myself, and I have become attached to the wall. You must gain control. That is the roadblock. The 4 yogas tell us how to demolish the roadblock. True knowledge says that which you created only you can demolish, nobody else. This is the second stage of awakening. Okay, so that's the end for now of the Swami Yudhishwarananda excerpts. So let's explore these walls now in more detail and how they block the direct experience. Remember, what Vedanta teaches is we have to have that direct experience. And as we just heard, unless and until we have that direct experience, according to the Swami, there is no rest, no peace, until we have this experience beyond all names and forms. And Swami Yudhishwarananda just said we have to break down the roadblocks. So now I want to switch to some excerpts from Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. And in that section where he talks about receiving news without a wire, and he explains the limitation of information collected through the nervous system, and this is a quote. "All of the sensations and motions of the body are being sent into the brain and out of it through these wires of nerve fibers. The columns of sensory and motor fibers in the spinal cord are the Ida and Pingala of the yogis. They are the main channels through which the afferent and efferent currents travel." Then he asks the question, but why should the mind not send news without nerves, or react without the nerves? The yogi says if you can do that, you have gotten rid of the bondage of matter. Swamiji Vivekananda continues. The mind has made this network of the nervous system and it has to break it so that no wires, no nerves will be required. When we can send and receive information without the nervous system, then alone will all knowledge come to us. No more will be the bondage of the body. If we can send the mental current through the holic canal in the spinal column without any nerve fibers to act as wires, the yogi says the problem is solved and also says it can be done. So recall that question that we asked in the Upanishad earlier. What is that, knowing which all is known? And Swami just said that if we can adopt this methodology, all knowledge will come to us. And tell a story. A seeker approaches a teacher of Vedanta with a question or problem for which an answer is sought. This is quite common, in fact, is one of the primary ways in which Vedanta is taught through satsang, dialogues, question and answer sessions. And so imagine this seeker now comes complaining about the state of the world. It's a question that's quite frequently heard in Vedanta satsangs and discussions. And the complaint could be about many things: poverty, pain, conflicts, war, suffering, destruction, injustice, unrest, one type of government or the other or another. The list of such complaints, when you observe the world from the human perspective, is quite long. But as part of their answer, many teachers of yoga and Vedanta first point out that the world experienced by seekers is much different than the world experienced by the teacher. In many dialogues between Nisargadatta Maharaj, as recorded in the book I Am That, Nisargadatta Maharaj directly asks the person asking the question, which world are you talking about? Your world or my world? Now that book is over 500 pages. And this question, which world, your world or my world, appears over and over. Many of the dialogues, Maharaj starts by asking that question. And of course you can imagine the person who asked that question is usually surprised, saying, you mean we live in different worlds? And the Maharaj always answers in the affirmative. And this is one snippet from one dialogue. He says, yes, your world is private, closed off, and entirely your own making. On the other hand, my world, not my world, but Nisargadatta Maharaj's world, is free, is open, and available to all. In my world, nothing is wrong. And of course, this confuses the questioners who see worlds full of problems. And so I tried to put this in a picture format of, as I meditated on that section, what it might look like. So the figure at the bottom with the halo represents the enlightened being, the seer, the person that had that experience of the infinite. And then up in the cloud, which represents the totality of the conscious field, each of the individuals have access to a small piece of it. This is our personal worlds. Okay. And you can see I get the two people in the middle. They may share some, that's where people, right now we share a little bit of in common, that we all think we're in Providence, Rhode Island, at the Vedanta Society, Center, hearing a lecture. We see the same number of people, the same decor in the hall and everything. So we share. So you share some information with others, but there are also personal aspects to each of our lives as well. So that's what this picture is trying to convey. But the yogi, the person who has experienced this, sees life this way, and he sees that each person has an individual world around them. But having access to the larger field of consciousness, sees a different world than we experience. And it's not until, as we heard from the Swami Adishwarananda, until we have this direct experience of the oneness of all, then we will see the world separated in compartments like this. And Nisargadatta goes even a little bit further in another dialogue where he says, the person asks him, well, what do you see? Do you see people and animals and objects the same way I see them? And he says, what I see is pools of memory in the single field of consciousness. Okay, so this is from his explanation to one seeker. So not only does he not see people, but he sees the people are being manifest as such pools or bubbles of memory in the field of consciousness. So this is an important idea. So we have to look then at what forms these pools of memory and how do they affect our view of the world compared to the view of the world of a realized person. And so when the question is press the Maharaj about these problems and how they can help, and you often get the answer, well, it is your world, you created the problems, you alone must fix them. And remember what we heard from Swami Adishwarananda on the second stage of awakening. Ultimately, it comes to your mind, you created walls around yourself. True knowledge says that which you created only you can demolish, nobody else. This is the second stage of awakening. So we want to keep poking at this idea, I think, a little bit. What creates this different world between that seen by the experienced, those who have experienced this universal consciousness and those who have not? And in an online video called Trapped in a Psychological Game, Sadhguru, who is also a contemporary well-known internet personality, also of a teacher of yoga, was asked by a questioner. He was having a large, and the question came to him, how is it that what comes into your mind when you hear a question makes you able to answer that question with such wisdom and such certainty and such confidence? Where does that come from? Now, that video is tagged with the Creative Commons attribution, so I'll feel free to excerpt a little bit from the dialogue there as well. And so, like Swami Vivekananda in his Raja Yoga, Sadhguru too discusses the human neurological system in his answer. And he begins his reply to this person. Now remember, just to paint the picture again, this person in a large group had his turn to answer the question, and he asked, how is it that you're able to get this wisdom and give us this answer? What is that, knowing which all is known? Or how do we get access to this field of infinite knowledge? And so Sadhguru begins his reply, again, talking about the neurological system. And he says, well, the human has the most complex neurological system of all beings. But he points out that it has evolved for the purpose of sampling our environment, bringing in the various stimuli into our brain through the senses, primarily for survival. And so then we'll ask, or I'll ask, if this network of nerves has evolved for our survival, why did Swami Vivekananda write, quote, the mind has made this network of the nervous system and has to break it so that no wires will be required. And interesting. And we already heard the answer from Swami Vivekananda. Then alone will all knowledge come to us. Then alone we experience the answer to that question asked in the Upanishad. What is that, knowing which all is known? And so far I think we see that the difference between the seeker's world and the world of the yogi, implied in Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, explained by Nisargadatta Maharaj, and as directly explained in Sadhguru's online lecture, is that of selective processing. And so I want to do a simple example with you now. So I want you to, I'm going to give you about 10 and 15 seconds. Take a look at that and tell yourself what you're seeing. Okay, so I could go around the room and survey different answers if we want, but I can just also surmise what people are thinking. So I think I'll just do that in the interest of time. So one person may say they're seeing 5 stars. It's a valid answer. Another person may say they're seeing 5 stars of 3 different sizes with different number of points. Okay, that's also a valid answer. Another may see 5 stars in the shape of a cross. Okay, that's also a valid answer. Somebody else, perhaps with a different level of subject matter knowledge, may give a different answer, and so I'll give you a little bit of the context now. So what you're looking at here on the right-hand side is a region of the sky. The red triangle is called the summer triangle. This is 3 constellations which appear. It's even out even now. And in the upper left, the one in the grayish circle, is the constellation called Cygnus. So Cygnus is the swan, and astronomers call it Cygnus the Swan or the Northern Cross. It has 2 names. So any answer that you told yourself is fine because it was based on your inputs combined with either your previous experience. If you were an astronomer, you knew the answer, you probably immediately went to the Cygnus the Swan answer. Not that that's necessarily better, by the way, because this shows you that your preconditioning, your history, your knowledge, your education conditions your response to things. So somebody looking at it fresh could come up with different answers. So one summer, I think it was July 2020, there was a comet that came through this area, and like many comets that have periods of thousands of years, it's a once in a lifetime. So you go and take the chance of seeing it or you miss it. So I went with some friends. We went down to Cape Cod, which is probably one of the darkest skies we can get around here without going to New Hampshire or Maine. And we were looking, we had a wonderful night, wonderful clear night. All of the constellations, you could almost see 360s because we were on the seashore, so we had views all the way down to the horizon. So we could see quite a bit. And so one of the people I was with, she said, "Oh yeah, look at that sailboat." And I had never heard of that region of the sky being referred to in anything as a sailboat. And I said, "Well, tell me, what are you seeing?" And she pointed it out, and sure enough, she convinced me that there was a sailboat there. Okay? And so in all my training, I never heard the same constellation referred to as sailboat, but it could be. If I gave the same quiz to some of our summer camp kids, they might even go as far as to say, "I see a kite." Okay, so you're getting the idea of how we build our view of the world now. It's preconditioning, it's selective inputs of the things that we pick up. So we're continually surrounded by all kinds of vibrations, light vibrations, sound vibrations, mechanical vibrations. And each person selects from that infinite field of vibrations in which we're continually submerged. All right, and this is exactly really the point of the yoga teachers. So we develop our personal worlds. And now we can ask, well, why? And so this brings us into the idea of the reasons and mechanisms for our selections. And again, yoga science has detailed knowledge about these. So some of them, of course, are built into our nerves. And with a little practice of yoga, you can easily experience for yourself that when you look at something, there is a trigger that goes on before the thought appears. And they're beginning to measure this even now with MRI and some of these advanced things that they'll tell you a decision is made like so many milliseconds or so many microseconds before, and they're starting to do those things. But you can experience that for yourself quite easily. So that there's some nervous preconditioning, nervous system, which is why Swami Vivekananda says we have to get out of the realm of the nervous system. There are genetic components, of course, too, things we've got through heredity. And then there's another dimension, and this is where I want to drill down on memory a little bit. So Sadhguru explains that what we call memory, which is primarily, and just street conversation, my memory, is what we call that which we can recall. But in yoga system, they call that the articulate memory. And according to Sadhguru, it represents about 1% of the total memory in a system, of a person's system. He said that the body itself is a great reservoir of memory. And a lot of our behaviors and things come from memory that's not even in our awareness. It's in our nerves, it's in our genes, it's in our subconscious memory, it's in our body. That's all of this mechanism is governing what we're picking up and creating our world from the environment. Okay? Now, somebody who's so internalized that they can detect all of these different processes going are in a better position to manage it, of course, right? So I remember in Raja Yoga, Swami Vivekananda says that with great attention, one can separate the physical gong, a gong or a Big Ben clock or something, a bell in the room. When it hits the ear, when it gets converted to the pulse that goes from the ear to the brain center, from the brain center, the presentation to the witness, and then the witness response, and then the reaction. They said somebody very well trained in yoga can track each of those individual events, whereas we tend to hear, oh, the bell went off, okay, without ever bothering to separate all of those separate pieces. Okay, and Sadhguru goes on to explain this physical memory in the following way. He says items like salt shakers, passing them from person to person, can actually transmit some of the energy. So in the culture, there are cultural behaviors and rules developed such that if you were at a dinner and you wanted to pass somebody, say the salt or the sugar or something, they may say, no, please put it there, and they'll wait a minute and then they'll pick it up. And I know some friends of mine who follow these teachings very, very carefully. And so they won't even eat in public places or take food prepared by others, just for the same reason that they don't want to pick up these external vibrations. And also physical contact with other people and things. So these are very subtle rules that were developed as part of the yogic culture because they are aware of these other memories being passed from person to person. Okay, but now, if you think about all of the things we've talked about so far, think how complex this world we build for ourselves is. And a lot of the mechanisms are for reasons that we don't even necessarily have full grasp on or even full awareness that they're happening. Okay, so we build up our likes and our dislikes and other psychological conditionings. And then when we find something that's favorable to us, we want to repeat it. And we repeat it and we repeat it. And so that gets itself ingrained into the nervous system. Or if we have a bad experience. I know one person who was stung by a hornet as a young girl. And to this day, the sight of a bee, even if it's 5-10 feet away, she'll go running because the incident was so traumatic and it's so ingrained into that person. So I hope by now I've sort of convinced you that the way we build our personal worlds is quite complicated. And this is how the teachers of yoga and Vedanta say. Each person is living in their own self-created world. But then Vedanta makes another point which is definitely worth emphasizing, actually. Anything that we collect, so I can take this paper, I can say, this is my paper. I'm using it as an instrument, but it's not me, okay? I should never say this is me. It may be my possession for the time being, it's my paper, but it's not me. And this microphone is not me. So for simple objects like papers and microphones, mic stands and chairs, we generally won't argue with that too much. That this is not me, this is not me. When we get to the level of body, it becomes a little harder to say, that's not me. But it's an accumulation. It's an accumulation of, right, we're born about this big. And over the time, we keep feeding food, boom, boom, we're accumulating. Basically, that's the way Sadhguru would say, you're just accumulating parts of the earth in yourself over a number of times, and so you grow up to your current size. So the body itself is an accumulation. It's also an object. We can see it. So from this point of view of Vedanta and the self, capital S, self, it is not the true us. It's just another object. Okay? The argument gets even more difficult or more subtle when we talk about thoughts. But you think about our thoughts, right? Again, we're born as a young child not knowing much of the world. We go to school, we pick up a lot of facts and details and things, and we go on picking up facts. But again, that's a collection of things. And being a collection of things, they're for my use as a conscious being, but they're not me. I am not my thought, I am not my body, I am not the podium, I am not all of these things. And of course, for our emotions and intellect, it's the same way. So we mislead ourselves by that fundamental association as referring to these things, body, mind, intellect, as me. And Swami Chinmayananda actually on YouTube has a nice video where he uses like an eye chart, BMI, body, mind, intellect. And he shows all of the associations and the relationship between the bodies and the physical objects, the mind and the feelings and the intellect and the thoughts. And he says you have to go beyond it all, beyond body, beyond mind, beyond intellect. Then you come into contact with something called the vasanas, which are all of these other hidden, subtle things behind the movement of the body and the mind and the intellect. And you have to go by that, beyond that. And only when you go beyond body, mind, intellect, and all of the subconscious, subtle, missing stuff that we aren't aware of, only then do you come into contact with these Vedantic truths. So, which walls? We've heard about the walls. Which walls? Well, the walls we are built. And Sadhguru in his video used the word psychological drama. And so remember, just to circle back and give you the context of where we came from now. So the person asked Sadhguru, how does all of these words of wisdom come to your mind so that you can answer our questions? And the Upanishad asked, what is that, knowing which all is known? And so Sadhguru asked the person, said, well, he says, you're living entirely in your psychological drama. It has nothing to do with the real world. And then he explains the following thing, because in another video they asked him, how did you become Sadhguru? I don't know exactly what that means, but how did you become it? And he says, I used to go into the woods and just sit there and not think about anything. I didn't take any cell phones or radios or computers. I just went and experienced life for what it is. And he answers the person that same way. He says, mostly everybody's involved with the chatter here instead of the reality the way it is. And so he says, that's the difference, he says, between my ability to generate answers for you. He says, I have nothing going on up here. So therefore, I can create these responses to you because they're not preconditioned by anything. He hears the question and he gives the response. It's kind of an interesting thing. So I remember when I was in grade school, and it was in the Catholic Christian tradition, so they have a concept there called original sin. And there are various meanings of it there, but as a kid I used to ask myself, I wonder if original sin is the acquisition of memory. Can you imagine, right? If it was the acquisition of memory, could have been original sin. And then from the point of view of Yoga and Vedanta, I may not have been too far off the mark, even as a kid, because think about it. There is the now, this right now. And rightly seeing, according to the rishis and teachers, eternity is not necessarily an extension in time, forward, backward in time, but eternity can be experienced here and now. And you say, well, How can that happen? But if you think about it, it's our accumulated memories, which are forever bringing the past into the present or trying to project the future, right? So if we had a pleasant experience in the past, we may want to project it and say, I wanted that to happen again. You know, I love that vacation down to the Bahamas. I think I want to plan another trip, right? Something like that. Or we had a bad incident, something in our life. I told you about the person that had the bad experience with the bee. So then you see the bee and you think, oh, immediately that's going to happen again. So the memory, it's our accumulated stuff, which is not the I, but the accumulated stuff, which is bringing the past into the future, past into the present, or trying to predict the past into the future. And so for all of these things, we're never fully in here and now, I guess, or the present. And, let's see. The other thing about accumulated memory and information that I wanted to mention is that the measurement process, by its own nature, has issues with it, because all measurements can have bias. All measurements are limited, right? We can only measure if I have a meter stick that doesn't have any other markings on it. I can only measure the room to so many meters and then make my final estimate by a fraction of a meter. But even scientific instruments that can measure way down into nanos and picos, still they have their limits. So all measurements are limited in terms of what their resolution, and they can have bias, right? Matter of fact, right before we started this talk, I was waiting for that clock in the back to say 5 o'clock, and then I took out my phone, and my phone said 7:01, and that one was still saying 4:59. So it was a couple-minute bias in a very simple thing as a clock. Okay. Matter of fact, I know people who actually turn their clocks ahead or behind a little bit, so they, well, if I turn my clock 15 minutes ahead, I'll always be on time because I'll get up. No, you won't. You'll subtract it out. You'll subtract out the known bias that you built in. Now, if you have somebody go do it for you, maybe it stands a chance. But, okay, so these are the walls, and these are the memories. Now, I'll just tell you a story of how it all works in a 2-minute story. There was a lady who used to walk to work every day. And she used to take the same route every day, and there was a block of stores there. And one day on her way, it was Monday, she looked, and there was a new store there. It was a pet store. And right square in the middle of the showcase window was a parrot, a big parrot. And so as she walked by, the parrot looked at her and said, "Hey, lady, you're ugly and you dress funny." And so you can imagine that's a shock to your psyche, your emotional system. So she hurried to work and talked to all her colleagues and told them what happened and tried to get their support and their encouragement. They told her, "Don't worry, it's just a stupid bird, don't pay too much attention." So she went home. Tuesday comes, the same thing, same store, same parrot. Same happening. "Hey, lady, you're ugly and you look funny. And you dress funny, sorry." That went on Wednesday, Thursday. Friday, she couldn't take it anymore. She said, "I got to take this situation into my own hands." And she went in and talked to the pet store owner, who was very nice, very polite. And he said, "You have my assurance that when you come by on Monday, this will not happen again." And she thanked the shop owner, very nice person. So Monday she came back with a little more self-confidence. She said, "I have the assurance of the shop owner, the pet store owner," and she seemed sincere, and it's not going to happen. So she paused and she watched a few people go by. Parrot didn't say anything to them. And so she goes with confidence, you lift up with that little bit of confidence, stride in your step, and she gets in front of the window, and the parrot says, "Hey, lady." She says, "Yeah," with a little bit of defiance. The parrot said, "You know." Okay, the memory. All it takes is repeating a few things a few times. It gets into our subconscious. And then on the minor trigger, And thank you. That joke is courtesy again of Swami Adishwarananda, by the way. When that first retreat when I was here, he told that joke, and I said, all right. Because if you saw him, he was like a stern grandfather type, very stern. But when he started telling his jokes in between all of his serious points, I said, this is a nice way to learn Vedanta, actually, because he would build things up to a boiling point. He would hit you with these facts of Vedanta, boom, 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 and then he realized, well, the pressure must be getting turned up too high, so he would throw in a joke here and there just to turn down the pressure. But yeah, so the joke is courtesy of Swami Adishwarananda, but it makes a very, very good point, actually, though, when you think about it. And they talk about that. All of these samskaras, vasanas that are in the back of the mind, they're waiting for the right condition to manifest. So some of them can lay latent with us for a long time until the right circumstance comes out, at which point the circumstances is right, it's there, it manifests. Okay, so this is a little bit of how the yogis view our behaviors and how we act in the world. Okay. So I'm going to go back to Swami Adishwarananda. And remember what we heard. We'll recall what we heard earlier. And he said, direct perception of truth is through the soul, not the mind. And direct perception requires that we first purify our minds. And the proof of direct perception is the permanent transformation of character. And Swami Vivekananda, we had already heard that he already told us we have to bypass the neurological system. And he said the yogis say it can be done. Now, in his book, Human Being in Depth, Swami Ranganatha describes something what he calls the second homeostasis. So the first homeostasis was developed for us by nature, by evolution. And that was basically control of things like the heart rate, the pulse to trigger the breathing, temperature regulation, so we don't have to go out and sit on the sidewalk on the sunny side of the street, but turtles and frogs and things do to get their temperature up to the operating temperature for the day on a cold morning. But we have our temperature regulation, our heartbeat, our digestion. It's all been controlled for us. But the second homeostasis that Swami Ranganathananda was talking about takes a person beyond the automated functions and extends it to even more the day-to-day. But he does point out that it's not given to us by nature and it has to be earned. And I started thinking about that, and then I read a passage in the I Am That book, Nisargadatta Maharaj. And he also explains the similar thing, that the basic body functions go on below the level of consciousness. You know, he says you're aware of food only while you're tasting it, but then once you swallow it, the rest sort of happens automatically. And this and then it goes on unless there are injuries or disease or some particular problems. But generally they go on without our awareness. But then he asked the listener a startling question. He says, why object to a situation where even the day-to-day functions of life can be also carried out somewhat automatically? And I thought that was a very provocative question, actually. But we can infer, or at least I inferred from that exchange, that if it's really possible, then, you think of it like a self-driving car, which is where things are headed. Then us, the driver, the soul, the chariot, as it's presented in the Katha Upanishad, right? The riding on the chariot, which is symbolic of the body. Then it would leave us free for higher purposes, such as experiencing the truth or pursuing God in spiritual studies. And so we think, based on these trainings of yoga and Vedanta, a certain lifestyle, working towards developing these, purifying our mental, our residual impressions, I guess, as well as working towards this second homeostasis. All of these things contribute to taking us beyond the mental drama, the psychological drama. And that seems to be the prescription for Vedanta. And I remember a famous professor, I won't use the name because I'm hearing the story secondhand, so I won't just, but he was a professor at a very famous university in New England here. And he reached some fame in his career to the point where he had a certain algorithm or something named for him. He solved a very difficult problem. But according to the story was he would often be seen walking around the campus, and when he saw somebody in his class, a graduate student or an undergraduate student, he would always ask them, "Hey, have I had lunch yet today?" And you just get the sense of how deep he was immersed into the problem he was trying to solve, that these basic day-to-day functions started to fall below his awareness, and that kind of lines up with this idea of the second homeostasis. But now, in the last few minutes, I just want to, again, take a summary of the world according to Vedanta, and then look at some prescriptions based on the world according to Vedanta. So, the summary of the world according to Vedanta, Vedanta seems to recognize that there's, at some level, there is a world of objects to be experienced, the immanent as well as the transcendent, but ultimately they are really one. And Swami Vivekananda in his Raja Yoga, he says, what's outside is unknown and unknowable, and really all we know is our reaction to it. How we navigate this immanent world, it depends on many factors that we've already discussed, which partly influence our happiness, our peace, our joy, our modes of expression. But just navigating within this world does not take the person to the highest bliss. Vedanta says we have to go beyond this and experience the unified field of oneness. So our navigation of this world is by our conscious and subconscious factors, and some of our responses are evolutionary conditioned into the nervous system. Some are developed through repetition and habits by likes and dislikes. But ultimately, I think all of those have to be broken. So each of us creates our own world through the selection and processing of a subset of the innumerable inputs and characterizing them as pleasant and unpleasant, desirable or undesirable. And, memory, it's memory that creates time and space to a large degree, pulling past experiences into the present. Pleasing memory becomes a desire to repeat. Unpleasant memory becomes the intent to avoid. So what are the prescriptions then based on these? First is fix thyself. They always say don't necessarily complain about the world. First fix thyself. And even in the Bible it says remove the log from your own eye before trying to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Only those who experience this state of oneness are really able to help the world. That help may occasionally be physical, such as providing food or shelter, or psychological. But the only real help which can be given is spiritual, and spiritual is providing the tools and methods for those in need to grow, to solve their own problems, and ultimately to reach this state of the highest bliss. Until the experience of oneness is had, our activities and efforts should be based on one or more of the 4 yogas. As we heard, those break down the walls. And so that would be like Karma Yoga, work for the sake of work. Work helps to develop attention and deepen our concentration, improve our abilities to solve problems. And then this improved concentration can be applied to work and worship. It helps reduce self-centeredness, and we become more selfless, which is part of it. Nisargadatta Maharaj, in his book, had an interesting point. He said that work done in the interest of oneself requires a lot of effort, a lot of energy. However, work done in the benefit of others, especially their spiritual benefit, gains the help of the universe, was the way he put it. He says the universe so aligns itself that selfless service gains momentum. The right person or the right people sometimes ultimately come along to help the cause. And I remember there, too, a story I saw on the news. There was a young child, who heard about some cause that the child felt passionate or moved by, so went, and I don't remember if it was a boy or girl, doesn't matter, emptied the piggy bank, had a few dollars, said, all right, I'm starting a fund for this cause. And then people started to hear about it, and more people started contributing to that cause. And so from a child with a few dollars in a piggy bank, it grew to several $1,000s. So again, this is sort of this idea that we're selfless work done in the interest of others kind of gets a momentum going. So in conclusion, this is my understanding of the world according to Yoga Vedanta as taught by many yogis, rishis, and monks. I think it's important, I'll summarize since I borrowed a lot from Swami Yudhishwarananda with the way he put it in the Vedanta Way to Peace and Happiness, which is, he says, Maya is the very mind which attempts to divide the indivisible and limit the unlimitable. And that's a direct quote. But of course, for the full context of the teachings and to read additional details, I'll just run through the credits and acknowledgments. And since these are being captured on YouTube, if you need to refer to them, you can just go back and look at that. But these are some of the sources that I used. And this photo was taken from Apollo 8. So one of my joys as growing up as a kid was the space program. So where else do you get a view from the world except for from the moon or from the Vedanta's highest state, okay? So thank you, friends. With that, now we have the announcements for the week. Swami Yogatmananda is currently in North Carolina. He'll be back on Tuesday to hold the Tuesday class as usual. On October 22nd, they'll be celebrating a big celebration for Durga Puja here. It begins at 11 a.m., ends at 7 p.m., and that includes our standard program for worship, including chants, singing, prasad, lunch, a video, a lecture, they're having a dance, and then Sankirtan in the evening. So you're welcome to come for all or as much of that program as you would like to attend. On Saturday, October 28th, from 10 to noon, there is a workshop on the fourth generation of management by Swami Nikhileshwarananda, and that will be here, 10 a.m. to noon. And then there's an upcoming retreat with Swami Savapriyananda, a well-known speaker on Advaita Vedanta. Early registration discount ends on October 23rd, so that's a week from tomorrow. So if you want to get the discounted rate of $30, register before October 23rd, which you can register from our webpage or in person here. Next Sunday, the talk will be given by Swami Yogatmananda, and he'll answer the question, what does Durga protect? And that will be at 5 p.m. next Sunday. So with that, we'll do the closing prayer. May the Divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from death to light, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you, friends. You can now go into the shrine for arati, and that'll be followed by soup supper after the arati.
Man farm Stainless Lord, assuming human form, transcendent yet filled with love. You free us from the stain of sin and ornament our world. Consciousness is your form. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Looking at them, illusion is gone. Ocean of shining love and feeling, ever inebriated in your infinite love. Your feet always dear to your devotees. Your feet always dear to your devotees. Form a boat to cross this world. Revealed to us as God incarnate and the Lord of all things, helping us join with you. Your mind's always set in the divine light. Your mind's always set in the divine light. This we can see through your grace. Destroyer of worldly sorrow and compassion so infinite is your word. Your life's offered for the world's deliverance. Your life's offered for the world's deliverance, saving us from darkness and fear. Renouncer of all lust and lucre, therefore you were always spurning sensual life. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Grant to us pure love for you. You're fearless and you're free from doubting, with your mind very firmly resolved. Causeless refuge of your devotees, causeless refuge of your devotees, renouncing caste and birth. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of life. You give love and even-sightedness. You give love and even-sightedness to remove our anguish here. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of life. You give love and even-sightedness. You give love and even-sightedness to remove our anguish here. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Yet you are the basis of both. O Lord, yet you are the basis of both. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Darkness is destroyed by your light. O Lord, darkness is destroyed by your light. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Yet you are the basis of both. O Lord, yet you are the basis of both. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Darkness is destroyed by your light. O Lord, darkness is destroyed by your light. Dhe 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 langa ranga bhanga, these are all the sounds of mridanga. Dhe 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 langa ranga bhanga, these are all the sounds of mridanga. Spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. Spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. Jaya Jaya for your worship divine. Hara Hara for your worship divine. Shiva Shiva for your worship divine. Breaker of all our worldly bondage and adored by all, we adore you too. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Auspicious and blessed graciousness sublime, all noble ends you give to us, granting us refuge, all seeing Gauri, O Mother Divine, our love to you. Creation, preservation, dissolution are your powers, eternal one. Nature's real basis, nature's essence, O Mother Divine, our love to you. We come seeking refuge from anguish. Be our Savior through your deep concern. All our suffering remove, Goddess. O Mother Divine, our love to you. Victory, O Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Jai Shri Ram Krishna Dev Ki Jai. Jai Shri Sarda Devi Ki Jai. Jai Shri Swami Vivekananda Ki Jai. Jai Shri Buddhadev Ki Jai. Jai Shri Jesus Christ Ki Jai.